Okay, what we want to do this afternoon in wrapping up our discussion of Leibniz is, first of all, to make some comments that we did not have time for last time on the problem of freedom in Leibniz, and then, since that is prerequisite to it, getting into the problem of evil. Leibniz theodicy, of which you have an abridgment in the anthology. Leibniz theology is one of the classics in the whole history of thought, dealing with the problem of evil. So that's where a lot of the focus will be. But plainly, if Leibniz, as a Christian thinker, is going to be dealing with evil, moral evil in particular, he will be expected to have recourse to Augustine's free will argument. And consequently, the question of human freedom becomes very important. Now, we've already seen in this period of the 17th century that people like Thomas Hobbes, Benedict Spinoza, seem to reject a realistic view of freedom of the will. If we distinguish between realism and anti-realism on various topics, then they're both anti-realistic about freedom of the will. While we seem to ourselves to make free choices, that experience of a free choice is simply a confused idea. The choice itself is caused by the causal processes that dominate everything else. On the other hand, the other extreme, if you like, is Descartes' indeterminism. Because by virtue of the mind-body dualism, two separate entities, there is no necessitating the mind in its concepts, as distinct from percepts, in its conceptualizing, its reasoning, or in the assertion or denial that the will makes in relationship to what it knows. The human will, according to Descartes, seems to operate in something of a causal vacuum, a completely indeterminist situation, which is only possible because mind, of which will is a function, mind is a separate entity, functions independently, not causally dominated, though cause-effect connections between mind and body do occur in relationship to physical stimuli producing sense responses, emotional feelings, so forth. But the will remains free. Now, Leibniz then, in this context, is, if you like, caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. Which way is he going to go? But remember that he is developing a different kind of metaphysical system. His is not the kind of mechanistic materialism of a Hobbes, nor, on the other hand, is his simply an indeterminist kind of system in which all you have is efficient and material causes, as in the case of Descartes. Remember, he's developing a teleological metaphysic. He talks of intrinsic essences for every monad, so that it has its own potency pre-established to be actualized. And you get the picture from thinking about his theory of monads, that everything a monad does is due to the inner nature of that monad, which is, as it were, pre-programmed to function as it does. Now, at first glance, that seems to imply some kind of inner determinism, some kind of inner self-determination. What I do is determined by my individual nature, and all natures are individual. Determined by my individual nature. But the question then boils down to this: whether my choice is determined by who I am, by my nature, and if it is, whether I can modify who I am, my nature. Let me say that again. Whether my choice is determined by my nature, by who I am, or whether I can modify my nature, who I am, within parameters. In other words, am I free to have an effect on my nature even if I am not completely free to choose? You see. If we grant that my choices are constrained by the essence, which is mine, do I have any power to modify in any regard my essence? That's the way the question seems to come out. Now, initially, you find some passages in Leibniz in which he seems to reject necessitarianism, the view that choices are necessitated, a matter of causal necessity. Let me draw your attention to two of those. One of them in the Anthology on page 223, which is the abridgment we have of the Theodicy. And let me read what he says in the first column, about a third of the way down. The predetermination of events by causes is just what contributes to morality instead of destroying it. You're familiar with the old objection that determinism would destroy morality because it would rob us of individual responsibility. So the predetermination of events, he says, is what contributes to morality instead of destroying it. Causes incline the will without compelling it. Okay, sounds there is some residual freedom. Causes incline the will without compelling it. This is why the determination in question is not necessitation. It is certain to him who knows all that the effect will follow the inclination, but the effect of which implies contradiction. It is also by an internal inclination such as this that the will is determined, without any necessity. Supposing one has the greatest passion in the world, a great thirst, for example, you'll admit that the soul can find some reason for resisting it, if it were only that of showing its power to resist it. Thus, although one may never be in a perfect indifference of equilibrium, you say there's that causal vacuum. You're never in an indifference of equilibrium. There may be always a preponderance of inclination for the side taken. it never renders the resolution taken absolutely necessary. Now, he seems to be saying there is always some power of contrary choice, granted the inclination. Even if the only reason for resisting the inclination is to show what a he-man you are, you see, there is still that power of contrary choice. Sounds like he's arguing for some degree of freedom. Page 229 has something similar. This is the section 30 from the Discourse on Metaphysics. Section 30. Where he is speaking of the way in which, and this is halfway down the first column, God, in cooperating with ordinary actions, only follows the laws that he's established. And what he seems to have been saying in the other passage, in this one as well, is that God, having established laws, also has complete foreknowledge. Complete foreknowledge. And because he knows what will be done, it can be said to be predetermined. But that does not mean it's necessitated. Hypothetically, it could be otherwise. It's as if there is sufficient reason, but not necessary reason, making that distinction. So back to the passage then on 229. He follows the laws he has established. That is to say, he continually preserves and produces our being. Remember that the process of creating is an ongoing one. Fulguration is a continuous imparting of the power to be. Spontaneously, there's that inner determinism. Or with freedom in that order which the concept of our individual substance carries with itself. So the thinking process and the particular sequencing of ideas is an expression of the freedom to be ourselves. And this can be foreseen for all eternity by virtue of the decree which God has made that the will always seek the apparent good in certain particular aspects. That's the teleology. He, without at all necessitating our choice, determines it by that which appears most desirable. So it seems that God then, in creating us, creates us with a desire for that which seems most desirable, and that is what we do. Now, of course, God can make certain things appear desirable, so forth. For absolutely speaking, our will, as contrasted with necessity, is in a state of indifference, being able to act otherwise, wholly to suspend its action, either alternative remaining possible. It therefore devolves upon the soul to be on guard against appearances. Appearances, yes, what seems